Hi you guys and welcome to my channel. I'm back with a new reaction video, and finally, oh my god, so many of you have requested me to check out Joe Louis. This video is called Boxing's Greatest Champion, the Real Captain America. I've been waiting too long. I've been dragging this one out, so I'm finally gonna check out the Joe Louis. So I'm not gonna ramble and let's get straight into this little documentary. Alright you guys, let's go. Joe Louis, boxing's greatest champion.
Because of this amazing record, the sporting press has nicknamed Louis the Brown Bomber.
Before Jackie Robinson or Muhammad Ali, there was Joe Louis.
Boxing's Brown Bomber was a champion's champion. Known as the Brown Bomber for his punch and string of knockout victories.
Maybe he can go on. Yes, he's going to continue.
Isn't it?
A great inspiration in so many ways to so many people.
The Brown Bomber.
Shit, you saw how the body is.
Greatest heavyweight of all time. It's going to be Joe Louis, the Brown Bomber.
Born in Alabama in 1914, Louis's parents were sharecroppers.
He was around at a time when this country didn't treat black people properly. Yes.
There are about 9 million Negroes in our southern states, and the majority of them live on farms.
Long and blistering days working the fields hardened the young Louis. His father was committed to an asylum early in Joe's life, so his mother moved the family to Detroit. It was here, at age 15, he discovered boxing. He won the Golden Gloves and turned pro.
People don't realize how many times
I can imagine being great at that time. Like, it just gives me chills to just think about it.
he fought as an amateur. He fought over 50 times, won a Gold Glove, and found that area of competence that all kids are looking for.
Louis fought and won 23 fights in his first year as a pro, knocking out all but 4.
Backing off, only Courage keeping him up. Another good right hand by Louis, and another! And down goes Alator.
He's one of the most balanced fighters I ever saw, Ken. Always in position with his footwork.
There's that left hook.
So precise with it.
Joe Louis with the best.
Alator draped on the rope. He's being counted out.
He was just so pragmatic and just so delivering. He gets turned, he just does it like he's breathing.
He's not talking.
He's a master.
I think he was the best heavyweight that I ever saw in my life.
Joe Louis goes on to win another in his march to the World's Heavyweight Championship.
His management came up with the brilliant strategy to grow Louis's name. He would fight in the hometown of almost all of his opponents, giving the home crowd a chance to see their fighter stop this mythical Brown Bomber. As a result, Louis set record gates at most every fight he had.
I am the king. I am in best shape in my life, and I'm going out to beat Joe Louis.
Might not even cut it.
Turn back the clock to 1935. That clean, good-looking colored boy is Joe Louis.
So he's like a top look at Joe Louis. He's gonna fight him.
Cocky and assured way to do it better.
Louis tore through the division, a true first of his kind.
He was at the top of his career. That's the same guy. That's the same guy.
You can see that even then the word was out. This guy Louis is a killer. Stay away, stay away. Levinsky is scared to death.
He never gloated. He never boasted. He didn't stand over his defeated foes. All of this was part of the image he knew he needed if he ever hoped to get a title shot. The press treated black fighters as horribly as you'd imagine they would in the 30s.
Boxing writers in particular delighted in devising nicknames for the new black prospect.
You see, there had only ever been one black heavyweight champion, Jack Johnson.
Just seconds
before
the
only one champion, but just not the only one who got a chance.
police stopped the motion picture cameras and entered the ring to halt this very one-sided fight.
Champions that never got to
Jack Johnson becomes heavyweight champion of the world.
What a time.
But white America found Johnson offensive.
Johnson had been despised by white America.
He was loud and arrogant, and even dared to have affairs with white women.
Because of this, black boxers were frozen out of title shots.
against, affairs, but shout out to him.
For 29 years.
You gotta be unapologetic during those, you just gotta cut out.
There was almost a conspiracy not to let another black near the championship.
Jack Blackburn really didn't want to train him. Really didn't want to spend any time with him because he didn't think he'd ever get a shot for the title because he's black.
He famously told him, if you ever hope to be champion, you'll need to be twice as good as the competition.
His great trainer, Jack Blackburn. They were a great partnership.
This is Primo Carnera. He was a 6'7", 270-pound former champion.
Down he goes to the plate left. Down on the cut.
That's him too? He got knocked out by Joe? Is that Joe?
Shaft died 5 days later.
Carnera was seen as the representative of the Mussolini government.
World War II was just around the corner.
There's a lot going on here, you guys. It's a lot going on.
The sensational brown bomber from Detroit and ex-heavyweight champion Primo Carnera.
Never out of position. And he was a great puncher with either hand. And he didn't waste anything. There was no space in between his punches.
No unnecessary throws. He's saving his energy for the hit.
They were short, concise, explosive.
Down a third time. Carnera tells the referee he can't go on. It's all over. Joe Louis, the winner by a TKO.
Lewis's victory over Mussolini's giant elevated him in the American public's eye.
He was the only black man that was portrayed in newspaper articles other than crimes.
Joe Louis was respected by everyone in the world. I mean, he was loved.
He was an idol of black America. Proof that if given a real chance, they could compete and they could win.
Whenever he fought, the streets were empty. Now, the minute the fight was over, you'd see hundreds of guys, and we would imagine it better than we ever saw it.
Max Baer was known as one of the hardest right-hand punchers in the history of the game. He was a former champion and a seasoned veteran.
I'm not making any prediction what round will knock Max Baer out in, but I'm going to knock him out just as soon as possible.
In the midst of the Depression,
I believe him.
Joe Louis versus Max Baer sold out Yankee Stadium and
Yanks?
cleared the first $1 million gate in over a decade.
Oh, I thought he was the turning point in boxing. There was a moment in time when a fighter threw punches that you didn't see and the other man fell. And then we knew it had become the sweet science.
Joe Louis, a very, very economical mover, wastes very little, very hard puncher too.
I'm not gonna lie, he's taking those hits.
A true practitioner of the sweet science.
And he's gone down now from the right to the chin. Slow motion fall there from Maxi Baer.
And he was the greatest finisher maybe of all time in the heavyweight division. Not maybe, he was. He got you hurt, he got rid of you. He got you out of here.
Like quality over quantity. He got those few hits.
Chance. Joe Louis dropped him 4 times in 4 rounds.
A fourth round winner by knockout impressively over Maxi Baer. Didn't he do well?
There you go.
Pressure was mounting to grant Louis a title shot. But there were many who still could not accept a black fighter. He was passed over again and again.
And a 21-year-old Joe Louis, the overnight sensation of the heavyweight division.
It's not to say I'm not surprised.
Charles Retzlaff.
Louis fought everyone who was out there. It's not Louis's fault that he was so much better than they were.
Louis was a devastating counterpuncher.
Powerful.
I didn't follow because he was going for Louis. I was like, oh shit, he's gonna knock Louis. But Louis just right back. Look at the response.
With a lightning will put the gloves into the canvas.
Don't step on my feet.
He brought courageously getting to his feet. Louis, who already had a reputation for
the response is quicker than the answer.
He stalked the guy. He was calm, his demeanor, real calm all the time, to the body, to the head. Oh boy, oh boy.
His dominance in the ring and unquestionable character outside of it made Joe the first black sports superstar in the world. Just one more hurdle lingered before they'd have to give Lewis his title shot. Max Schmeling.
Schmeling was a hell of a fighter. Joe Louis was the Brown Bomber. He was coming up. He was undefeated.
Schmeling had studied film of Lewis, a privilege not afforded to most fighters in this era.
The great famous saying from that fight, again, before the fight, where Schmeling, a German fighter, said, "I see something."
Max, from watching Joe Louis in pictures and in action, have you discovered any particular weakness in the Brown Bomber? Yes, I did. But I will tell you.
Was that when Louis threw his jab,
Of course.
he brought it back low.
That happened all the time. He was always doing that. But no one else was able to take advantage of it because Louis was so fast.
And what he saw was that Louis would jab and he would leave. You should never leave your head on the right side.
He noticed a flaw in the Brown Bomber's style.
Schmeling had noticed that he was vulnerable to right hands.
Schmeling was precisely the type of skilled and crafty veteran who
And
could
imagine that the technology back then was almost non-existent, kind of, and he got to watch the videos and study it differently. He got the advantage when that
exploit it.
Schmeling was a great fighter, and he was a real good puncher, accurate puncher, and he took advantage of that.
Joe Louis is down. The Louis' jaw and made Louis give ground, and there Schmeling straightened up Louis with hard rights and left to the jaw. He has puffed up Louis' left cheek.
A dynamite right, and Louis goes down. Max Schmeling puts a temporary halt to the meteoric rise of the Brown Bomber Joe Louis.
The Lewis defeat made Max Schmeling next in line for a title shot.
Winner is Schmeling!
The Brown Bomber won his first 28 fights before being knocked out by Max Schmeling, a former world heavyweight champion from West Germany.
Now here's something funny.
German.
Joe Louis was continuously passed over for title shots because he was a black fighter. However, Max Schmeling was viewed as Hitler's poster boy.
One of the fears was that Schmeling would win the title from James J. Braddock, take the belt home to Nazi Germany, and nobody would see it again.
So America was stuck between a rock and a hard place. A title fight between Joe Louis and Jim Braddock was made, passing over Max Schmeling, though Louis had to sign away 10% of all his future purses to Braddock.
Braddock's manager basically made Louis agree to give him a percentage of his purses for the rest of his career to get the fight.
What?
Yeah, but there was an understanding that, you know, you're not getting a fight otherwise.
For the first time in 29 years, a black fighter would get a shot at the heavyweight title.
And now, here in Chicago, the heavyweight boxing title is at stake. Will Joe Louis walk out of the ring as heavyweight champion of the world? We'll soon know.
There were history of black families, you know, poor black families that would get hope from just saying, hey, Louis did it. I don't want to hear that you can't do this. Joe Louis did it.
Challenger from Detroit, Joe Louis.
It's bigger than myself.
And so he was that important. That's the only point I'm making here. He was that freaking important that what they fought, what they did, what they overcame, where they came from. When you talk about all the things that we're here to talk about character, about talent, about perseverance, about resiliency, about caring about more than yourself, about strength. When you talk about all those things that we try to say that we care about, he was all that. He was all of that.
That's it. That's all you need. 1, 2, 3. But yeah, this was the big one. This was the big one.
6, 7, 8.
Champion?
The Brown Bomber had captured the heavyweight title. He was champion at last.
Yeah.
A living legend.
He made it look too easy.
The heavyweight champion of the world from Detroit, Michigan,
the immortal Joe Louis.
The most powerful individual in the world, the strongest individual in the world. A black man was once again the heavyweight champion of the world.
In the black community, he was more than a hero. He was the shining example of overcoming the odds.
Joe Louis wears the crown of all the heavyweights, despite the arguments as to whether he is the real champion or not.
Yeah, he wins the title. And of course, the biggest sport in the country. So all the press is there, and they're, Joe, you're the champion world. Not yet. Not till I beat that man. He didn't even have to say his name.
That man was Max Schmeling. Joe refused to call himself a champion until he avenged his only defeat.
Joe Louis defends his World Heavyweight Championship against former title holder Max Schmeling, the only man who has ever defeated the champion.
Louis secluded himself into training. He knew, as did everyone else, that this fight was the most important of his life. Viewed as a battle of nations, politics, ideas. Boxing is war individualized.
Wow, look at this.
Pitting man against man.
The heavyweight championship, its meaning was transcending pure supremacy in the ring. Its meaning was really that of a world beater.
German troops marched into Austria for what the Germans called the reunification of the two countries.
Everybody recognized what Schmeling represented.
The stage is set for their historic rematch.
The match had become more than sport. War was coming.
On the verge of World War II, with Hitler, a madman, trying to create a master race, take over the world. I mean, the whole world's watching. You talk about pressure. That's why Louis is the greatest.
Yankee Stadium, New York City.
If he didn't win this world title fight against Max Schmeling, he was ruined.
And it's in Yankee Stadium outdoors. I mean, you talk about a setting, a stage.
The eyes of the world would watch the clash. The gate was the biggest ever for a boxing match.
The whole freaking world's watching. The President of the United States calls up Louis and says, you got to win this for the good guys. I mean, you talk about pressure.
A black fighter carried the hopes of the free world.
Tall guy, there,
Detroit Brown Bomber, world heavyweight champion, Joe Louis.
The largest audience in the history for a single radio broadcast tuned in.
U.S. against Germany, black guy against a white guy. You couldn't draw more divisive lines at those times.
It was a watershed moment that transcended sport.
That he's got to save basically the United States and the world from
scourge
and disease of the Nazi party.
For one night, Joe Louis had united the free world under a single cause.
A crushing right explodes off Schmeling's jaw. Joe steps back.
And Schmeling was in fear right from the beginning.
One
He
hit?
realized that this is something else, a
Man,
different
no.
kind of catch.
How does he respond to it? He
the buttons?
destroys him. He annihilates him. He knocks him out in one round.
Is it one round? You guys heard that? First round?
That to me is one of the best stories of a heavyweight fight.
Schmeling fell victim to the Brown Bombers blitzkrieg.
I think that's the greatest single event in the history of the world.
It doesn't look like
Don't follow my
Schmeling's gonna
feet.
make it. It's
Don't follow my feet.
Joe
Excuse you?
Louis electrifies the boxing world with his magnificent first-round devastating knockout over
And still champion, Joe Louis.
Louis's victory electrified the country.
And Joe Louis and Benny Leonard, they were fighters. They let people know they had value, that their race had value, their people had value. They had value. They pulled people out of those places.
It was the most uniting force I've ever seen in my life.
He began his historic run of 25 straight title defenses, 22 by way of knockout.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin. The White House has just announced that the Japanese are attacking military and naval establishments on the island of Oahu.
In 1942, with America firmly involved in World War II, he enlisted in the Army.
I'm only doing what any red blood American would do.
During the war years, Joe Louis fought some 96 fights all over the world. It was said that some 5 million servicemen had a chance to see the champion box.
Lewis's ring career was never interrupted, not even for World War II, when he staged exhibitions under the claim, "I'm not fighting for nothing, I'm fighting for my country."
He frequently donated his entire purse to the Army or Navy Emergency Relief Fund. An act of kindness that would haunt him.
Here we are in Madison Square Garden for the Joe Louis Abe Salmon Heavyweight Championship bout.
Private Joe Louis Barrow reports for duty.
I said no because I did not want to see him there. I wanted him to, do what he's great at.
Duty in this case means that he is defending his $1 million World's Heavyweight Championship and donating his entire purse to the Army Emergency Relief. Joe's mad now, and he shows it. Fighting mad. He's throwing dynamite.
And Joe always had a heart of gold. During that time, it was not on just one occasion that when a loved one died, Joe would pick up the funeral expenses for a fellow serviceman.
Here it comes now.
I feel like he should keep doing that.
Wow.
He's a role model to be able to do something else.
Incredible fighter and individual.
A great soldier, a great champion, and a great man.
There's Joe Louis, once again, his hand raised in triumph.
Never before and probably never again has a champion donated his entire purse, in this instance around $70,000, in the bright and brave cause of patriotism.
The IRS would come at Louis years later, saying he owed millions on these donations.
See, this is what you get for being kind and honest.
Louis would suffer financial ruin from this for the remainder of his life.
This World Heavyweight Championship for the benefit of the Navy Relief Fund.
All these fights for the troops, sacrificing so much to be an example for the country, and he was ultimately left penniless as a result.
And he's gone over. Billy Conn on the floor in round 13.
Well, I'm not waiting for nothing. I'm waiting for my country, and I think that's about the greatest piece of work that anybody can do.
The heavyweight king, Joe Louis.
Joe Louis was an authentic hero as opposed to a surplus hero.
In all, Louis spent 17 years in the ring, 12 reigning as heavyweight champion.
Now it's Joe Louis, the Brown Bomber at his dynamite best.
The war was over.
That the forces of Germany have surrendered.
Louis had now been champion 10 years. Father Time is undefeated, and many were speculating when it would come for Louis.
Between the champion, Joe Louis, and his challenger, Jersey Joe Walcott.
The super fight brought out all the celebrities.
And from Hollywood, Jack Benny and Bob Hope, Eddie Cantor, Joan Blondell, and producer Mike Todd, and FBI Chief J. Edgar Hoover.
Boom, perfect timing.
For the heavyweight championship of the world, champion Joe Louis in the black trunks, challenger Jersey Joe Walcott in the white trunks.
Win, lose, or draw, Louis had stated his intent to retire following this fight.
Walcott is out in front. He's knocked Joe Louis down. And the crowd, the big crowd here at Yankee Stadium now is really on the edge of their seat.
Right back now. So you cannot go out like
Walcott was ahead on points.
Watch Joe Louis.
What?
The devastating Joe Louis of old.
Let me see it.
Raining punches.
Let me see it. You don't care about the points.
Now, in slow motion, here is the champion in all his fighting fury.
Louis delivered the perfect combination and put Jersey Joe down for the count.
He's in real trouble, though, and the fight is over. In Joe Louis' 25th title defense, he looks like the great champion of old.
He had now defended his title 25 times, an unmatched record that stands to this day.
Is the retirement of Joe Louis, for 11 years heavyweight champion of the world. He has defended the championship
It's a record of
times.
Joe Louis, 25th title defense. He looks like the great champion of old.
He had now defended his title 25 times, an unmatched record that stands to this day.
Is the retirement of Joe Louis, for 11 years heavyweight champion of the world. He has defended the championship 25 times since winning it from Jimmy Braddock in 1937.
It started when he donated 2 purses, one to the Navy and the Army Relief Fund, and they wrote the checks to Joe Louis. And he immediately signed the checks to the Navy and the Army Relief Fund. But because they were made payable to Joe Louis, they wanted him to pay taxes on it. Could the IRS have made an exception? Yes. Could they have interpreted differently? Yes.
After 2 years in retirement, Louis was faced with massive financial problems.
You were away for 2 years.
I was away for 2 years, yeah.
And
the income tax has also
right.
something to do with me coming back, too.
Yeah, we know that.
It was a good payday.
The Brown Bomber was desperate, and so he returned.
Winner by unanimous decision and heavyweight champion of the world, Ezzard Charles.
He fought and lost by decision to Ezzard Charles, but his financial problems still lingered, and so he accepted the biggest payday he could find against an up-and-coming Rocky Marciano.
Marciano, we checked him out. Like a split nose and everything, just sort of meat. It's amazing.
Louis has 3 inches on Marciano's height and 9 inches in reach.
He had no subtlety. He had a Susie Q.
So
the greatest right hand in the history of boxing.
Marciano's right is his most damaging weapon.
And Joe Louis said, he doesn't really fight by the book, but I got hit by a library tonight.
Marciano's the sluggard type of fighter. His arms are unusually short for a heavyweight, but he's strong and he's powerful.
You can compare him to a street fighter with a huge heart, and he never lost.
His career finally came to an end when he met Rocky Marciano in 1951. Marciano knocked him up in the 8th round.
Marciano's hard left hook sends Louis sprawling to the canvas.
It was immediately clear that Marciano's power was too much for Louis.
Now watch, a left, another left crumples Louis, a blazing right.
Marciano was known like having unbelievable strength in his punches, he could just.
Rocky Marciano had something that you can't teach people.
Which is just
brutal strength, brutal power. He just had the ability to land these bone-crushing shots.
The fight would be a passing of the torch moment from one legendary champion to the next.
The great Joe Louis defeated.
Like they had like a little bit of similar style, Marciano and Joe, like with the few hits, but they're so powerful and the calmness to it, the body language.
Ending up his career that way, I think at that moment it might have influenced me in retiring maybe a year before I would.
A tragic and sad ending to the career of perhaps the greatest of all time.
Oh.
He would spend the rest of his life doing everything possible to repay the debt,
Death is the worst.
including participating in a wrestling match for $100,000.
Washington, the Bomber takes on cowboy Rocky Lee, 320 pounds. After 10 minutes of tugging, hauling, and poking, a right forearm smash sends Lee out of the ring. And the winner is Joe Louis.
Despite this final payday, Louis was still deeply in debt. He couldn't catch up to the IRS, who were charging him $50,000 a year in interest alone. He ultimately found a home at Caesar's Palace in Vegas.
How long have you been working here at Caesar's as a greeter?
7 years.
Where he lived and worked until he died at age 66.
Today, America lost one of the finest boxers of all times. Joe Louis died of heart failure today in Las Vegas. He was 66 years old.
For an emotional service in memory of the former heavyweight boxing champion Joe Louis, who died of a heart attack last Sunday.
He was laid to rest in Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors.
Former heavyweight champions Jersey Joe Walcott, Joe Frazier, Muhammad Ali, all came to Arlington Cemetery yesterday to pay their last respects to Joe Louis, who may have been the greatest heavyweight of them all. He was buried to the words of the New Testament. I have fought the good fight.
Called by many the greatest ever, he broke down numerous glass ceilings
Joe Louis!
and inspired the next generation of black Americans, paving the way for the likes of Robinson and Ali.
Sitting here, taking his mouth guard out, shaking his head. It doesn't look as though he may make it this time.
I think that people would say that because there was a Joe Louis, there's a Jackie Robinson in baseball.
And Joe Louis, the sensational young heavyweight from Detroit. They call him the Brown Bomber.
For a record 25 World Heavyweight title defenses, Joe Louis becomes a legend in his own time.
Joe Louis, the Brown Bomber.
Adored by fight fans throughout the world, respected and feared by all heavyweight challengers.
Joe Louis will be remembered for not only his record, his fights, but as a man.
Revered in boxing's Hall of Fame as the greatest heavyweight champion of all time.
Nobody brings it home like Joe. It's nobody.
Make it so. I couldn't really focus at the end. Like, it didn't sit right with me when they showed the funeral here. Like, all this. And I get it. You guys can, like, disagree with me and say that I'm wrong. But, like, he doing all this when he passed. And when he was alive, he had to just, like, you know, go through the hell with the death and everything. And couldn't even, like, live a good life that he deserved. And then is this huge thing that probably cost so much to do all this, like, but when he was alive, couldn't do anything. They couldn't even write it off. Like, they could, but they didn't want to. So it just, it doesn't sit right with me at all when I see things like this. It's just, I don't know, it's sad. I feel like he deserved just a better ending. Just thinking of the things that he put in, like, and what he meant to so many people, like. But yeah, I finally checked him out, Joe Louis. I really enjoyed it. I hope you guys did too. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And hopefully I will see you guys in the next video. I appreciate you watching. And if you made it to the end, thank you. Yeah, bye.